Imagine an entirely persistent medieval war that rages for days, weeks, or months. A map that spans continents, that has teams fighting and working together to cut down, gather resources, to build siege engines and huge castles, and finally to wage war on each other. This is Anvil Empires, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about it in today's video. Now, if anybody wants a bit more context, Anvil Empires is being developed by Siege Camp. It's an indie studio that's known for quite a popular World War II game, Foxhole. Foxhole is a World War II MMO that does pretty much this, but within, well, the Second World War. Okay, I've slightly lied. Foxhole is kind of its own fictional war that has a lot of World War I and World War II stuff, but we didn't get tanks like this within the First World War, so I'm going to say that it's closest to that. It is a game that expands what people thought was possible for an MMO, and my god, does it have a huge fan base, fighting out in huge clans, thousands of people trying to gain or defend ground. Now, Siege Camp, the developers, have had so much experience within this sort of thing. They spent over 5 years refining Foxhole before it fully released in 2022, and that's what they're hoping to do here. The background gave the team experience with creating these large player-driven war games, but more importantly, well, they've decided that because of their growth and success of Foxhole, they would split up a little bit. Anvil Empires, this new game, is being handled by a separate division within Siege Camp, so the Foxhole team can continue to support that game. With Anvil Empires, they aim to take the massive war concept from Foxhole and transplant it into a medieval fantasy setting. Once again, a bit like Foxholes, we're not talking about a specific conflict, but taking ideas and inspiration from many. There are, well, some Roman-looking lads, there are a lot of medieval-looking siege engines. If you like historical accuracy, this probably isn't the game for you, but if you understand that fun is way more important than getting the right sword for the right occasion, well, you're going to have a lot more to take in with Anvil Empires. The developers have actually explicitly stated that it's an incredibly complex game, and that their main focus is trying to experiment and iterate from what Foxhole's already was. Look, I guess you could say there was a bit of a template with their first title, but in this, well, I think it just does so much more and in a so much more complex level, trying to get up to 1,000 simultaneous players within this persistent world. And my oh my oh my, it looks like more and more they're getting close. You see, the playtests have been going on. They are very tricky to get into, but my god, the footage that's been coming out of it is, well, for me at least, of mixed reactions. The entire mechanics of it are very impressive. Having this many people fighting in a medieval battle, having sieges, open-pitched warfare. In fact, on their first playtest, they essentially said to the guys, this is going to last as long as the war lasts. And it lasted about 9 days, which is insane. 9 real-life days, by the way. Fighting 24/7, people logging in, joining, helping their clans, so on and so forth. Although, admittedly, I think there's something to do with this fan base all having potato PCs, because a lot of the footage looks like it's running on your nan's 1998 XP PC. It's not the most gorgeous looking thing in the world. However, within their previous game, Foxhole, Siege Camp, the developers, proved that large-scale coordination and logistics can be fun, even with the extra roles, because not everyone's going to be fighting on the front line. Having truck drivers, factory workers within their World War II game, and now trying to move that over to Anvil Empires. Some people are just going to be serfs, chopping down trees, or even gathering and mining, because you need resources in order to make weapons. The developers have said that they want to make these non-combat roles just as deep as the frontline roles, carrying forward one of their previous game's greatest strengths. So what is it? What is the main aim for the long haul? Well, Siege Camp acknowledges that Anvil Empires will take years to fully realize. It won't be built overnight, and the early access or even these playtests are just going to be the beginning of ongoing development. In fact, Foxhole, in the previous game, took 6 years to evolve from a 64-player skirmish into thousands of players fighting multi-week wars. Now, they do say there should be a faster timeline for Anvil Empires because, well, they've got the resources and the experience that they've learned from their previous game now, but it is going to be a long journey of community testing and feedback. But let's actually get into the game. What actually is this title? A massively multiplayer sandbox war set within the medieval fantasy realm. A large-scale game of conquest played by thousands in a persistent online world. Players take control of individual soldiers or citizens in a war that can last for weeks per campaign. Now, these campaigns are called ages. Unlike theme park MMOs, the conflict is fully player-driven. There are no safe zones or artificial PvP barriers on the map, and this means that every inch of the world is contestable. It is all land that has to be defended or taken. This means that the emerging conflict will be completely driven by the decisions of the people playing it, all real-world people as well. The game is set on the continent of Caligo, a large land with diverse biomes such as highlands, swamps, and forests, and even dangerous creatures lurking about, adding in a bit of a PvE element. There's going to be 3 distinct factions, or alliances, vying for control. You've got the Novan Remnant, the sort of an industrious people reclaiming lost glory, the Iranic pagans, a displaced southern seafaring people seeking new land, and the Mirish, natives who consider themselves descendants of ancient rulers defending their sacred homelands. Yet how does that sort of translate into gameplay terms? Well, factions currently have mostly symmetrical capabilities, but the plan is to give them unique as the development progresses. These 3 factions are sort of reminiscent to your classic realm versus realm games, things like Dark Age of Camelot, providing a dynamic balance where these allegiances and rivalries will play out, but this time on a much grander scale. Well, scale is something that Anvil Empires is not lacking. One of the biggest features is this pure size. Battles can involve hundreds of players on each side, with the engine targeting up to 1,000 players in a single dense battle. Many more players will be spread across the world, of course, simultaneously engaging in other activities. There might be small skirmishes going on whilst the main battle rages on in the middle. There might be building or logistics happening whilst people are trying to get more resources to the front lines. There are no instant battlegrounds. For example, you don't have to log into a specific server at a specific time. These are just going to happen organically as players, well, get grumpy at each other. It is all one continuous war sandbox. So if a 1,000-person battle erupts on your server, you'll probably hear about it and you can go and join it. These massive battles will be shoulder to shoulder, and these are all enabled within Siege Camp's custom-built R2 engine, designed over several years specifically to handle these thousands of entities and players in real time. Because look, it sure does sound impressive that there's going to be 1,000 people able to fight in one dense portion of the map, but that doesn't even take into account everything else going on, or the other players that are far off in the flung corners of this medieval world, or even just the assets, the entities, things like arrows flying everywhere, siege engines being pushed around, or even trees falling over in the distance. These are all going to be able to be rendered at the same time, and so far from the gameplay, it looks like it's actually working pretty goddamn well. Players are going to participate as more of a single cog within the war machine. There are no main characters within games like this, and that's kind of how it translates into being more of a, I guess, a military simulation more than anything. I don't know, but combat is all within this third-person view, much like Foxhole's top-down perspective, but with a bit more of a medieval twist. You might be a foot soldier in a shield wall, or an archer on a rampart, maybe even a horseman scouting the enemy. Melee combat involves timing attacks, blocking, and positioning. And as somebody that loves melee games, Mordhau, Chivalry, Mountain Blade, this looks suspiciously tricky to get the hang of. And if I'm going to be honest, I don't know how well it works. The gameplay looks so incredibly janky when actually fighting, but if I'm going to be honest, that isn't really the point of these games. They just need to have combat that's good enough. You might be a foot soldier in a shield wall and trying to fight alongside your allies and making sure that you're blocking at the right time while your allies are getting the attacks in. There's going to be large formations with chaotic shield clashes, and I mean, to be fair, in the current pre-alpha, there's even these basic shield wall mechanics already, where you can stand next to your allies with your shields raised, and they'll boost your defense as a group, being able to kind of form sort of testudos. But strength of arms isn't going to be enough just to win the war. These games are all about logistics and infrastructure. Players can build settlements starting from these small hamlets to growing into fortified towns shared by dozens or hundreds of people. Within the settlements, players produce weapons, armor, food to supply this war effort. Economy is entirely player-driven. All resources and items are gathered and crafted by these players, and they're not going to be anything like, I don't know, spawned by NPC shops, having to buy things like that. These are all going to be real people having to do it. There's no hand-holding going on here. Even up to the transportation of goods. You might see player-built wagons and caravans hauling lumber or ore from one place to another. So let's actually talk about when it comes to conquering and sieging. Well, players will coordinate to build siege camps near enemy towns, much like they would have done in real life. These can be constructed with medieval siege engines like battering rams, catapults, siege ladders to assault these player-built fortifications, and they're going to last for days and days on end. They're meant to be these large undertakings. Attackers need to establish supply lines that keep their armies fed and armed during these prolonged sieges, whilst defenders have to make sure they've stockpiled enough resources to strengthen their castle walls, or even find a way to sneak more in. Smaller scale warfare also will exist in the form of raids. Players can form these raiding parties to torch enemy villages and loot resources. I mean, Picture this, for example. You are in an army sieging another castle, and you've built up these supply lines in order to get more resources like food, weapons, lumber to your attacking siege camp. But the enemy managed to sneak out a small raiding force out of their castle that they're defending. They then go behind your enemy lines and start burning your supply wagons. This means you can no longer get food to your men, and, well, they have to give up the siege. These are these cool dynamic options that you can do within the game and sort of just evolve naturally, as the game is a huge sandbox rather than trying to point you in a specific direction. In fact, there's even naval raiding being hinted by the developers, being able to actually get on boats at sea and find ways to conquer that way. The introduction of ships is planned as the world expands over water, but that's something that's going to have to be a little bit later. The war is day to day, but games will likely have delineated ages or seasons that last weeks and eventually reset when one faction achieves victory conditions. Time of day and seasonal weather effects are all simulated. Recent updates have actually added dynamic weather events and seasons that impact gameplay. For example, harsh winters or rainy seasons can affect your travel or combat, which will impact your ability to actually attack enemy settlements. But we've been through the game. Let's actually talk about the reality of it. Is this game going to live up to the expectations, or is it going to be a bit of an industrial mess? I think the title of Anvil Empires is a fantastic idea, and in fact, Siege Camp Games have proven they know what they're doing. They've done this before in the past, but the closed pre-alpha testing has come out, so we're able to get a bit more solidified evidence. As of 23, now access is very limited. The developers invited players in waves to participate in periodic playtests, but these have lasted quite a while. As mentioned, these are basically wars that they just let players play out and see all the available features. And despite it being pre-alpha, there's still an already core community forming around this game, which is part of the reason that I wanted to make this video as a new introduction. The official Discord server has been this primary hub, and it's got over 40,000 members already, so you can see, yeah, there's a lot of people that are interested. Overall, early testers and community members are still excited about the game's potential. Many fans of Foxholes have kind of jumped in and immediately appreciated the familiar emphasis on teamwork and logistics, now just with swords and sendals. Some players have noted that even in pre-alpha, the sense of scale is incredibly impressive. I mean, as a few quotes, there's some people saying this could be truly something special if the developers stick to their vision. For example, they have their own engine to run 1,000 players, and from very quick impressions, the overall design has had a lot of positive changes. Others talking about features like the shield wall already encouraging a lot of camaraderie and forming these clans as well. And the developers introducing new improvements all the time. Things like the specific melee combo systems, trying to improve that melee system that a lot of people are a little bit wishy-washy at this point in time. I think it's getting more and more interesting as we go on, and the developers are continuing to stick to it. And I think it's pretty safe to say that that's what's going to happen within the future. Don't get me wrong, there is going to be a bit of a learning curve. This is the type of game that's going to make new players feel a little bit lost. It's a war with pretty much no guidance. If you join mid pre-alpha test, you might just spawn into a field with none. Unlike structured MMOs, there are a few drawbacks here. The onus is on the players to organize. Some testers really did feel like the game was not very newbie friendly, which could be something that hurts it in the long run. There's a reason Foxhole isn't as mainstream as it can be, but I don't think it should be necessarily the most mainstream game in the world. There has to be that little niche for the hardcore fans that want that sort of thing. There are also some negatives with this kind of hardcore focus though. Foxhole's community has had some wishy-washy concerns about toxicity or its in-game politics. Its war chat is famously salty, and team killing or spy incidents happen all the time. Within Anvil Empires, that's probably going to be less of an issue since we're not focusing on a necessarily more recent and very political war here. There are 3 factions, so there's potential for even more complex social dynamics, but I think it's going to be very much trivial, and that is just the nature of times like this. Within the existing Foxhole community, though, not everyone is happy with Anvil Empires. Some players initially felt the trepidation or even resentment, fearing that developers are going to be taken away from their beloved Foxhole games. It's going to steal players, and it's already stealing resources from Foxhole, expressing these beliefs that the future updates are going to get slower and longer for Foxholes as Anvil Empires starts to come more into fruition. Whether this is going to be an issue, well, that's kind of up to the developers. It's one of those things that you can only see from proof and actions. Whilst the developers have stated that they've split off a separate contingent to work on both games separately, it is inevitable that the player base is going to be split now between these two types of games, but there's also the point that it's probably going to bring in new players. Now, from the outside, whilst there has been significant hype around Anvil Empires, especially fans of these MMO games, prospect of a truly massive medieval battle has given people a lot of lofty comparisons. Whilst one side is saying how they're going to transform medieval warfare games. The others are saying this is way too much. Siege Camp have been relatively candid and cautious in their messaging, which does help set realistic expectations. They've never promised a near-term full release. Instead, they continue to reiterate the experiment and iterate its new approach. They've explicitly said that early access will not be a complete game, and it's the start of a journey, and we're not even at that point yet. So there is still so much more time to come. In Developer Blog 1, they noted many features will be added or removed as they find what works and what doesn't, and this transparency really tempers some of that hype with patience among the community core. Players expect pretty long early access period with, well, comparisons drawn to Foxhole's multi-year early access, and yet still people are hyped about it. Balance is always going to be an issue. Ambition is always going to be over the top with this sort of thing, but I can't honestly say that I don't believe Siege Camp has got what it takes. They've shown they've done it in the past, and they're taking a pretty realistic response as it goes to it now. In fact, on this note, I wanted to bring in the latest updates and development on this roadmap. Siege Camp have been publishing developer blogs pretty recently, like 1 or 2 per month, to update the community with new features. By late 2024, they've surpassed a dozen of these developer blogs. Things like introducing that third new faction, the Pagans. For a while, the tests only featured 2 of the factions, but by early 2024, they'd brought them in. There's also win conditions and ages. The developers implemented a form of win condition rather than just having the test end arbitrarily. Now there are multiple ways to win. Military victories, cultural victories. Think of your, I don't know, general Civilization 5 game. Only one empire can achieve a given win condition, and war can end by any faction meeting any one of them. There's also economy and trade updates. There's a whole new feature adding localized trade resources, things like flax, lead, resin. These spawn in specific regions and rotate each in-game year. This encourages factions to establish these trade routes and raid each other to acquire set resources, with town marketplace buildings allowing players to list items for sale to other players in the same town, streamlining this player-to-player trading, replacing the more primitive shop system that came before. There's also taverns and social clubs. There's major reworks of fort buildings and towns, letting players, well, construct so much more rather than the goofy structures that came in before this new update. More than that though, by late 2024, the world of Anvil empires is starting to expand, with new additional landmasses broken up into islands and reaching this intended scale with naval vessels. They made their appearance firstly with cargo ships. There was this possibility to explore and reach territory across the seas. This cargo ship allowed for a lot of these transporting resources and added a new dynamic water mechanic that players would now have to factor into their, well, logistics. Of course, the combat is continuously improved with equipment hotkeys, attack chaining and combos, stability with pushing and things like that, being able to knock people over. Mounted combat came in, and siege additions with catapults being introduced, giving the faction that siege ranged option for breaking walls or even just hitting clustered enemies and spraying them off into the distance as bits and limbs go everywhere. As far as we're aware, this is going to be a huge game. Anvil Empires is shaping up to be a one-of-a-kind MMO experience, blending this strategic depth of RTS with the immersion of large-scale MMOs. The developers at Siege Camp have had a clear vision rooted in their Foxhole success, and they're executing it step by step with, well, community involvement. The game's enormous battles, persistent world, and emphasis on logistics and cooperation really do set it apart from anything else on the market currently. And, well, so far from what we've seen, things are going pretty goddamn well. One thing certain is that both developers and the community are rallying together for this grand vision, and I cannot wait to bring you more updates on it. So if you want to, please leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed this roundup. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more updates on games like Anvil Empires. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.